Our News on Terror segment tonight, London police announced they have no evidence attacker Khalid Massoud was connected to an organized terror group like ISIS or like Al-Qaeda. But it is naive to assume that Massoud was not influenced by radical Islam, especially since investigators have yet to decrypt private messages Massoud sent, messages that could provide evidence of Islamist motivations. With me now, cybersecurity, terrorism, and crime expert Morgan Wright. Morgan, good to see you.
Hi, Liz. Good to see you again.
Morgan, to me, this is almost mind-boggling naivete that the UK police are coming out and saying that they find no evidence whatsoever that Massoud acted with any Islamist terror motivations here, that he acted just as a lone wolf just because he's a violent criminal here, when we don't have any idea what was on that WhatsApp message, who he was talking to, what he said, what they said to him. We couldn't possibly know. Right.
No, you can't. And look, what they're missing the point is you can be inspired the same way Nidal Hassan was inspired by Anwar al-Awlaki through email messages. Now we're using WhatsApp. They're using encrypted messages. Look, it's the same playbook. It's using a vehicle. In London, he got out with a knife. He attacked a police officer. While they may call it a, quote, lone wolf, there was definitely coordination here in terms of the types of activities used, the types of attack, the method that they did. This is Nice, France, all over again. I mean, we've seen this happen. So they've got to, and we're going to talk about this, I know, in a minute, but the technology is the key to understanding who his connections were, what happened, what was said right before the attack, and then we can start getting a better timeline of how this whole thing unfolded.
Right, exactly, and I do want to get to the WhatsApp part of it. I'm not a techie, and I always have these questions for you. But you're exactly right. I mean, if we look at the tactics here, not only did the Al-Qaeda magazine Inspire, it's called Inspire, not only did the magazine call for these types of attacks, I mean, we saw it in Nice, we saw it in Berlin, we saw it in Ohio State, we saw it just last month, the end of January actually, in Jerusalem, where a car or a truck, a vehicle was converted into a weapon of mass destruction just to bowl down people because they don't have access to anything else. I mean, to me, it's so ignorant to think that this person wasn't inspired by those types of attacks. That being said, Morgan, let's get to the technical part of this, and that, I guess, in my opinion, is the balance between liberty and security here. The fact that we have a right to privacy, we have a right for the government not to snoop into our things, versus the fact that we need to know what he said to know who he was involved with to prevent other attacks.
Well, absolutely. And as we're finding out now, Liz, this person was on the radar of the Metropolitan Police. He was a known jihadist. He was somebody who they had their eye on before. All the hallmarks of somebody that you would want to monitor. You'd want to have some type of electronic monitoring. And I'll tell you, here's the rub about this. They actually could, there is a way to get to these messages even before they're encrypted. And this we found out through the disclosure of the CIA dump through WikiLeaks, is that the CIA, and I'm sure GCHQ, which is kind of the equivalent of the NSA in Great Britain, got the ability to find these phones, compromise them, get the messages before they're actually encrypted and sent. We could have found out what was on this person's phone. We keep taking all of these tools away from our intelligence community. These leaks that are coming out are treasonous, they're traitorous, they're putting us at risk. And as we're finding out with London, people are saying, well, why didn't you stop this? If it was known to you, why didn't you stop this? And the response is, we could have stopped it if we could have seen the messages that were going back and forth. If there's anybody that was a poster boy for monitoring, it was this guy.
Right, exactly. I mean, I would add one thing to that, and that political correctness stopped. They're so afraid of labeling someone a radical Islamist terrorist that they're going to dismiss him as periphery, that was their word, for fear of being labeled Islamophobic themselves. But Morgan, as someone who works in both cybersecurity and counterterrorism here, I mean, should they decrypt this intel? Can they?
Yeah, eventually I think they'll get to it. And look, they may have. The other thing, too, is they may have already gotten to the messages and they're just not saying anything. If there's something of intelligence value, the last thing you want people to know is that you've already gotten to it. People may take additional actions you don't want them to. Or, but the one thing that'll happen, it's for sure, is you got to find out who they're talking to, then who they were talking to, you want to find out who they're talking to. You've got to start finding this network of who's inspiring, who's controlling, how are they making the connections, how did this guy connect to anybody in the first place, why did he pick that day to go do it? And you're right, it goes back to the Al-Qaeda magazine, it's called Inspire. They may not be able to train them directly, but if they can inspire them to take action, it doesn't take a whole lot to hop in a vehicle, go drive a bunch of people over, then hop out with a knife. That doesn't take a whole lot of training, unlike a conventional terrorist attack where you have to plan, you have to get explosives, a lot of logistics involved with that. This takes no logistics, just
no, I mean,
car and one guy.
This is their new strategy. This is their unconventional warfare. They know what they're doing. They know how difficult it is for us to stop them versus if we were engaged in a traditional type conflict here. Morgan, this question, though, of the decryption, I mean, it's frustrating for me because WhatsApp is owned by Facebook, and Facebook caves so easily to demands from European or more socialist type countries that want to condemn free speech or hate speech or whatever you want to call it. But I guess this comes down, it's very similar to me to the discussion we had months ago about Apple, about San Bernardino and Apple not wanting to unlock that iPhone that the San Bernardino terrorist had. And they argued that it would have created a backdoor that could have been applied to all iPhones. That's why they didn't do it. Fortunately, in that case, the FBI figured out a different way to do it. But is that the argument that's being made now? And if it is, does it have any legitimacy?
No, I don't think so, and here's why. I would challenge, and this is the challenge. I listened to Loretta Lynch a year ago out at San Francisco talk about the whole deal between Apple and the Department of Justice and how all the tech people were coming out saying, no, we're not going to do this. So here's the easy answer. You signed a pledge that said even if it's your family, even if it's your people, even if it's your employees, you will refuse to cooperate, refuse to decrypt, refuse to help law enforcement get to this because you believe in free speech so much the government should be involved in it. But here's what it boils down to. My right to live, my right to free speech outweighs your right to kill speech, and kill speech are those messages that you're sending back and forth that are inspiring you. So my right to live outweighs your right to kill me, and we ought to get back to the basic points of, protection of human life should outweigh the concerns that somebody has, and you're right, get rid of political correctness, get rid of all this other stuff. Let's get down to find out if it's a criminal act, if they're about ready to kill somebody. Why don't we know about that? Why aren't we taking action for it? And what are we going to do to prevent it in the future? And technology now is actually the biggest thing hindering our ability to disrupt, find these organizations, and prevent future attacks.
Right, and it's almost embarrassing that Western countries like us or like Great Britain are behind the terrorists, that they're outwitting us when it comes to technology. We're the ones who invented it. Morgan, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being here today. It's always great to talk to you.